I love building high growth teams. I love building
Right.
great companies. I like business. It's really fun for me. I've also seen too many people lose themselves in the middle of it, get lost as a person, and let the business become who they are. I wrote the book a little for myself and a lot for others as well, just to say that like you can lead a high growth team, you can lead a world-class culture that others talk about, and you can do it in a way that honors who you are, like that is uniquely you. You don't have to recreate somebody else's version of leadership. You can do it in a way that's deeply who you are. And part probably that's the most important is the chapter on centeredness. What is the life that you're living outside of work that allows you to show up in a calm and steady way, that allows you to be a person that has vision, who motivates and inspires other people, who's open to feedback? That stuff doesn't just happen.
Welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jeff. It's good to be with you. Get the band back together.
Exactly. How long have we known each other now? We've been talking and working together on and off for a while.
Like almost 5 years, I think, actually. Like I think when you came in and helped my last startup, Amplify, kind of put in like our strategy execution system, basically, and learned a ton through that, and we did that. But that was quite a while ago now is the thing, because we sold our business almost 4 years ago now. So it's been some time.
And you've been at 15.5. Well, we're going to get into all that. But let's start from the top. Like, you just launched a new venture. Let's talk about that.
I did. Like this is fresh, like last week. But it's, it's funny. It's like it's publicly launched, but it's work I've been working on and doing on the side for years. About 4 years, I started Adam Weber Coaching. It's an executive coaching practice that helps leaders that are kind of in this pivotal spot in their career where maybe the company's like it started to achieve some level of scale, some level of traction, and all that organic goodness that got them to where they are to actually create like sustainable growth. It's like they also need to level up. They need to start growing personally as quickly as the business has grown. And so that's what I do. I sit with founders and key executives kind of on their own leadership journey and help them kind of lead authentically with who they are, but also build high performance companies and maintain that sense of wholeness in the midst of building an awesome high performance company.
So why did you decide to do that? Like what brought you to this new chapter of your life?
Yeah. It's almost an arrival of a thing I've been working toward all along. Like Amplify was an employee engagement measurement company where we measured cultures and then we coached CEOs and executive teams on how to build high performance teams. And ultimately, like when you're measuring cultures and what motivates employees, one of the things that always comes back in feedback is that the blockers that are caused by executives. Right. And that growth of the executive. And it's more irrefutable when it's through data too, right? So you're sitting in these really vulnerable moments with executives and recognizing that for those companies to achieve their goals, the executive has to grow. And so I think a lot of it is that through that work, I just realized like I want to sit with people in the midst of those really important transitions and growth opportunities. And I also really like the coolest thing about coaching to me is that in our culture today, like we're recorded right now, everybody's a little on edge with what they say, and I have to make sure I say the right thing. Coaching, we sign this contract, and it seems so small, but the coolest thing is like, hey, everything you say here is held in this room and on this call. And it allows someone to start saying things, like explore things maybe they haven't ever said out loud. And like you grow when you explore, and you oftentimes hold these answers that you need them to not be tidy and not perfect. And you need a person that you can just be like, here's what I'm really thinking, and here's what might work, and this might work. And there's something that happens when you start saying things you've never said out loud, where you actually get to the actual answer to. And I just think it's one of the coolest moments to sit with other people on that journey.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the space that we both play in. A lot of my clients are, when they get to that point of like, it's starting to feel like chaos. They have like 20, 25 employees. They need to figure out a system to scale. all the way up to companies that are, over 250 employees, where now we're scaling teams of teams. It's really interesting as a CEO or a founder. There's so many stakeholders. I always say everybody's your boss. You're not your own boss in a venture-backed company. Everybody's your boss. Your employees, your customers, your investors, your board, and all the potential employees, customers,
Right.
and board members and investor, right? So you're kind of surrounded by all these people, and you don't need to be, overly confident at all times. You should be able to put your guard down, but there are things that you have to kind of guard yourself from thinking before talking, and having like a coach that you can sit down with where you can just think out loud, I think is really important. I think that's an element that some CEOs, founders, and the people in their leadership team don't always see the light to that right away. And they can save a lot of pain by finding that a little bit faster.
Yeah. And there's two things you said too that I think jump out to me. One is, as a CEO, there's like an endless amount of inputs that are coming towards you.
Right.
And you're just like input. Do you have space and time to like process and then create clarity from those inputs? And a lot of times you just, because you're so busy, I mean, people used to follow me to the restroom. Like, that's how I knew I was busy. I was in like, just like endless meetings all day long. And then when I'd walk to the restroom, someone would use that moment and follow me in. And it's like, there's no time to process and think and to take those inputs and to have a point of view and a perspective, or to rank them in priority, right? So that's one side. But then the other is that when you are in this growth mode and you're experiencing stressors you've never experienced, you're having people look at you in a way you've never had before, there's undeveloped parts of who you are that start to manifest themselves unintentionally. And it causes damage on the culture. It creates inefficiencies in the business. And what coaching does is it allows you to lead with intention. Like, you can start to have a little bit more agency and a little bit more choice in how you show up. And part of my breakthrough for me as a leader was like, our first startup, we thought we were going to get 30 customers. Our first year, we had 100. And we were like, I went from my own little team at the time, went from 1 to 6, from me to 6 people overnight. Right. And I was stressed out of my mind. I was in this one meeting where I was disappointed with the results, and I like stomped out. I literally, like, we had concrete floors and concrete walls. And so it like echoed, and it was really far to the exit because we didn't have furniture yet or anything. This dramatic moment where it's like, boom, boom, boom. And like, I left, it was me acting involuntarily without agency. Right. And I inadvertently, like, I was super embarrassed by it. Actually, afterwards, I was like, is that who I am as a leader? Like, and it was really like through that kind of like coaching relationship where I started to go, understand your triggers, understand kind of what actions you're inadvertently doing that are actually not helping you build the thing you want. Like, when you're the blocker of your own dreams, like, that's a good sign that you're like, you're perpetuating issues inside the culture yourself sometimes.
Right. The one thing that I do in my pastime now, when I'm not working, is I love reading entrepreneurial stories and watching the really horrible entrepreneurial TV shows. And the one thing that I find every single time on all these shows is that it's always the entrepreneur getting in the way of themselves. Like the founder, it's like, you could just ask, what's that 1 to 2, 3 things that I'm not willing to do that they probably should actually do? Bar rescue, every time that guy, that Jim Taffern or whatever his name is, comes in, like, it's always the thing that founder doesn't want to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
I see that with teams too. When I bring teams together, one of the really big things that we do is review. Some people will call it like a quarterly review or annual review, but it's more of looking at like, what is not working? What is bothering us? Like, let's talk about those things. And a lot of teams, they don't have the right environment or haven't set the right environment. It's uncomfortable for them to talk about those things. But if we don't talk about those things, we can't make plans to solve them.
Right.
And that's maybe a little bit more of a macro view of, things that you probably encounter. But I think it's something that's really important. You have to set the right culture. You have to set the session correctly to be able to let people feel comfortable doing that. But I do think that's one of the most important things that we can talk about, are the things that are just not working.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you're spot on. I think, like, executive team dynamics, which is I do a lot of too. Like, how do we talk to each other? Do we say what needs to be said? Do we debate and represent our ideas in a healthy way, but then still disagree and commit? Like, is there enough trust and safety in this room that we're willing to hold each other to a high bar? And like a lot of times beneath the surface, there is an insecurity of self or some kind of unwatched aspect of your personality that is creating some level of tension in that group too, you know, and
Right.
it's not, it doesn't create the safety needed to build high performance teams, that these high
Right.
growth environments.
Yeah. How do you uncover that with somebody when you're working with somebody? How do you uncover these things that are blockers to them?
Well, if it's at the individual level, I mean, there's a couple aspects to it. There is like the one is like crafting a vision for your own life and really uncovering what it is that you really want. What do you want for your business? What do you want for your real life? Like, we all tell ourselves stories. And
Right.
sometimes it's like, oh, I want this promotion and this promotion and this promotion. And without asking, like, what is the life that you really want? Like, what's your why behind this? So I think one is helping people clarify what it is they want so that when they're working against themselves, you can say that and you can have that honest conversation. And when you do it, you're also on their side, right? The other is, you know, things like getting the feedback of the people that interact with them, what they look like on their best day, how they push the business forward, what their superpower is. And
Right.
the hard truth too is the other side of it. What ways do they slow things down? What ways do they miss great ideas and block from hearing something great, you know? And just kind of getting to the bottom of that. And there's a phrase, you know, my old coach used to say that was really impactful to me, is like, you're making progress when you're in on your own joke. Like, when you know the thing about yourself, you're aware of your weaknesses and you can say them out loud, right, to others, and others
Yeah.
can call you out on them. And you can really grow to the extent that you're willing to look at who you are and look at aspects of yourself.
That's really interesting. When you're in on your own joke.
Yeah,
that's the best place to be, really, because I think a lot of people are trying to convince people that that's not a thing, right? And they spend so much energy and time like trying to fight those things that they're maybe just not good at, when if they just let it go, they can move on.
Right, exactly. You know, for me specifically, like with my personality, like entrepreneur, I'm really excitable. I get worked up. If I get emotional, something triggers me. I lose in that moment. In that very moment, I lose the ability to. I lose my logic, and so my voice might escalate, but my case I'm building goes down. And so then I get more frustrated because people don't follow along. Sometimes they
Yeah.
did because of role power. Like, they might follow
Right.
along even if I'm wrong, is the problem. And being in on my own joke meant having the agency to go, hey, something triggered me right now. Like, I need some space to think through what I'm actually trying to communicate, because I'm not able to articulate well what I'm actually thinking. So give me some time. I'll sit on this. I'm going to send you all back some feedback. I could be right. I could be just triggered, you know, and just
Right.
like naming it. That's a whole different level of leadership than escalate when I'm actually just worked up about something.
When I facilitate, I have a kind of a handful of ground rules, you know, an open, equal, transparent environment, even though that we know that there is a hierarchy. You know what I mean? And the more I can get when we're doing sessions, the more I can get the CEO to come up and be transparent about something like that, to say something very transparent, brings the energy down in the room to allow other people to say, I'm having this problem. And oftentimes the challenges within companies isn't because people don't want to do something, aren't willing to do something. It's just that they get stuck. And sometimes you need other people's perspectives, the collective group's perspective on how to solve something or get around it, or decide, hey, we don't even need to do that anymore. You've been worried about that for 6 months, not talking about it. But you know what? I don't even think we even do that anymore. We should go this route. And I think what I find is it's sometimes hard to break that code within that team unless you can get some, you know, leading by example from the CEO to like admit something like, maybe I'm wrong. This is what I feel. This is what I did. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, or maybe we should do something else. Now, you still have to be confident. No one's going to false that's not confident, but to be a little bit more transparent definitely can help kind of surface more of the things that need to be talked about.
Yeah. Well, you're confident. I want to go back. I have a specific example of that too, but like on your on this kind of vulnerability, like naming these things, yes, it does have to be balanced with competence. I think that's the critical thing. When you're a
Right.
vulnerable person who is also competent, those are the very best leaders. When you're
Right.
all vulnerable and no competence, it's just you're just naming issues, but there's nothing on the other side. But most executives are quite competent people who really just need to stretch themselves a little to kind of say, like, take the air out of that tension out of the room. There was an executive I worked with who, through looking at their team and getting that feedback, what we found was like that the stress that he was facing, like that immense pressure, would manifest itself at the start of these team meetings by kind of saying all the things that are wrong. Totally inadvertent, didn't mean, but was just showing up with a bit of a negative energy. And they were all accurate things, but it changed how the team functioned because the team was like, negative vibes, big time, like it's all negativity. But when everything changed, when that leader agreed and recognized that wasn't the way, like, I still want to be able to name those things candidly, but that's not how I need to lead a meeting, like to start a meeting, right? So he told the whole team, hey, I got your feedback. I recognize this. I'm always going to start meetings with one positive thing that's going well that we want more of on the team. And if I don't, because it sounds like I have a propensity to start negative, we all are able to call me out. I'm in on my own joke, right? Like I know what's happening here. And so it is powerful when you do that. And then how it just like immediately, that small change, like released the tension and like created a better environment for his team.
That's so good. Yeah, one of the things that we do, so we have a weekly camp meeting. We call it the camp meeting with the whole peak operating system, staying in theme. The weekly meeting is a review of what's working, what's not working, and triaging items that are off course, right? Majority of the meeting is that. We're not going around in a circle and talking about what we're doing because we all know what we're doing. But how we start that meeting is best and thanks. We all go around and talk about one best thing that happened in the last week, business or even personal, and one person they'd like to thank. And so we start off this weekly meeting, and it only takes probably about 5-6 minutes, which is great. Positivity, what's working, and some gratitude. And it really sets the meeting up nice. And I think there's a few reasons for doing it. One, those meetings always start on time, and everybody's involved right from the get-go. So everyone's paying attention, involved. We got, people are thinking, in terms of like what's working, positive, gratitude. And I'm guilty of this. Earlier, when I first started companies, that meeting was always like down to business right away. I love business. I want to get down to business. And I kind of miss that kind of personal element of talking with other people or catching up, like what's going on with you. Allowing people to say one business best or personal best is great because now you get this connection with the whole team and you start learning more about each other every single week that you might have just missed if you just got down to it. And I was definitely guilty of probably, coming up with the stuff that's not working right away.
Yeah. Well, I think that example, which I love that about your process too, and I'm like in that every team meeting, like should have some small, it can be so fast, but some small humanizing element, because what happens too often at work is that we humanize ourselves and we have awareness that we have a real life going on outside of work, but we dehumanize the people that we work with. And so then when they have issues, and it's just good to make work a little less transactional and remind ourselves that each person has a story that's happening behind the output of the conversation. But I wanted to, like, I was just thinking about, implementing your process that like jumped out to me, a couple of things I thought were super cool. And they actually relate kind of to my world now and doing coaching. But one thing I loved about that camp meeting was this like off track, when things were off track, the triage process and like adjusting. What used to happen to us in our world is we're building a future that didn't exist. And so we were always overly ambitious. And then when we were off track, we just started to kind of like ignore. All right, move on. We don't know what to do. Like, all right, that's like, we're so far off. There's nothing to do. I like the honesty that it created to go off track, but adjust. I thought that was really cool. Like we started having more real conversations when we started doing that.
It's the ability to iterate, and I think that's why the cadence of every 90 days allows you to have like kind of a macro iteration, especially the annual. You're looking at 3-year vision, 1-year plan, next 90 days. And each quarter it's what worked the last 90 days, next 90 days ahead, and are we hitting the things? But that weekly is that iteration too. And like you said, most teams are very ambitious.
Yeah.
And then what do you do when you're off course? I mean, most OKR systems don't talk about that a lot, but most OKRs are off course. It's hard, especially as you're scaling quickly. You have more and more capacity. You have more and more people. Now you have teams of teams. It gets really complex, and if you're really looking at those things every single week and iterating on them, you easily get things off course, and then you start to get unaligned as a team. You create this alignment, and then all of a sudden it starts to splinter and splinter, especially if you're not discussing those things.
You stop looking at it, and then like it's like an invisible strategy that nobody knows what it is. The other thing, like when you're in a high growth environment, is that you don't know when you're building your strategy, there is future information that you are unaware of. Like you don't know that your competitor's about to release an AI version with a slightly different flair than the thing that you were supposed to release in 6 months. And then it comes out and you're just like, well, what do we do? Like, you know, how do we handle this new information that didn't exist when we built the strategy in the first place? And like, I just like the discipline and rigor of going, let's talk about it. Let's not all just keep doing our own individual secret strategies. Let's now reconvene, iterate, and kind of get back on track.
So important in this environment right now where companies have to be super capital efficient, because those things that are not being talked about are wasting hundreds, thousands of dollars, right? These things that we're continually working on, and maybe we're starting to go different directions, when if we could discuss it, we might just say, let's put that on hold, or let's bring it back this direction, or maybe we could try this. But a lot of times I find teams, when I first come in, they're continuing doing a lot of things. They always want to have that conversation. What should we stop doing? And I say, well, let's have the conversation what we should be doing. And then once we're done with that, we can talk about what we should stop and what that conversation is. Everything that's not on the list that we are doing, right?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I think right now it's so important for teams to really focus in on and have these conversations, because all those other things are wasting money, not moving the needle on the things that are probably most important for them. I want to go back a little bit. So we're talking about humanizing things. You wrote a book, Lead Like a Human.
Fitting with what I was just sharing. Segue.
Right? I wanted to call it Lead Like a Robot. No, tell me what possessed you to write the book, and what's that core theme in the book?
Yeah, the core theme. Well, I think what possessed me to write the book was to show people I love building high growth teams. I love building great companies. I like business. Like it's really fun for me. I've also seen too many people lose themselves in the middle of it, get lost as a person, and let the business become who they are. And so I wrote the book a little for myself and a lot for others as well, just to say that like you can lead a high growth team, you can lead a world-class culture that others talk about, and you can do it in a way that honors who you are, like that is uniquely you. You don't have to recreate somebody else's version of leadership. You can do it in a way that's deeply who you are. And the part probably that's the most important is the chapter on centeredness. And it's like, what is the life that you're living outside of work that allows you to show up in a calm and steady way, that allows you to be a person that has vision and who motivates and inspires other people, who's open to feedback. But like that stuff doesn't just happen. Like you actually have to live a life that allows you to do that too. So I just think I'm hopeful it's a book that was a safe place for other people to go, all right, I can do this. You know, the book talks about that moment I stomped out of that one meeting and embarrassed myself. That was really my turning point of going, this version of me isn't going to sustain the long journey of leadership. I need to find a version of me that can sustain.
Right. The book, it's funny. I feel like it's such a complimentary, we didn't even know each other at the time, but it's such a complimentary book to the book I wrote, Peak Teams, because a lot of the behaviors you talk in your book are a lot of the 5 behaviors I talk about that are about high performing teams, and how Peak will help the team embody those behaviors. But you talk a lot about communication, you talk about learning, you talk about empowerment, and I think it's a very nice companion book to what I wrote about, and having those elements and identifying and being aware of the power of those behaviors, I think is really important.
Yeah, there must be a reason we like working with each other. That must be there's some connection. Yeah, there's so many elements in the book too about like how you so many companies say they have a purpose, for example, but what
Right.
does it look like when a company's purpose is vibrant and like believed and lived by the employees? Or so many companies technically have core values, but they're not woven into the fabric of how they actually operate their business, right?
Right.
They're not woven into that camp meeting that you're running. Like a
Yeah.
company with alive core values, like it's actually talked about. It's so effortlessly a part of the kind of conversation of how people relate to one another inside the organization too.
Yeah, I think core values, and what I like to refer to them and think of them more as like core behaviors,
Yeah.
because I think we all have potentially different types of values that we bring to an organization, which is collectively good. But I think it's the behaviors that probably should be most rewarded and applauded. The behaviors of what you want the team to do, right? And I think identifying those and living those and finding ways to exemplify those is really, really important.
Yeah.
Speaking of the purpose, I like to think of like that North Star as that. I think Simon Sinek calls it like the cause, purpose, or belief is kind of like your why of the company, and really
Yep.
aligning to that. And I think really defining that's very helpful. Where I find, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, I find where teams get a little bit disconnected is that they go from this kind of broad why to this, what do we need to do right now? Right. And I think why I like to use the 3-year vision and the 1-year plan is to tie those together a little bit, especially that 3-year vision. A lot of people will say, especially the earlier stage companies, is like 3 years out, I don't know what's happening tomorrow. Why would I spend any time on that? Right. And even some of the later stage companies are like trying to do specific financials down to 3 years. But I think just at least painting a picture of that 3-year vision, getting some context to maybe how much money we would raise or what our revenues might be at or how many employees, I really think starts to set some context to that mission and tying that to like today to help the company, maybe the employees or the customers or the investors to kind of agree upon the path that they're taking and have a focal point of the big picture, kind of the future and today, to make sure that they create that alignment.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Or
100%. I mean, it's not about making it come true exactly in 3 years. It's that when
Right.
there's alignment on what it is, the day-to-day changes because we're all not guessing where it's going. We all have
Right.
we're all pointed to the same direction. There's a reason why even in my own, like when I coach singular executives and when I'm sitting with the CEO, why I have them craft a 3-year vision for their own life too. It's because then, and it's not like we spend all the time. We don't spend that much time talking about 3 years from now. We have
Right.
it as a shared way to move together. Is to go, this is
Yes.
but the general direction where we're headed, right? Are we making decisions about your bigger story, or are we stuck in the stress of this one moment?
Mhm.
And it just reminds you to stay connected to like the bigger thing that you're building too.
Right. Yeah, people do get confused. They think they're going to spend so much time on that. I'm like, no, it's a conversation you need to have. You need
Yeah.
a light conversation. And I always like to use the analogy of the peaks. So, if the mission is the North Star, that's the reason why we're going in the first place, what we're chasing. But we're going each year peak to peak, and that's like 3 years out, and it's cloudy and it's hazy. You just want to get some sort of idea. And every elevation you take, you're going to get a better picture of that. And it's going to
Right.
become more and more clear until that 3-year vision probably turns into your 1-year plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the teams that keep that so cloudy and don't talk about it, I often see teams are going in 5 different directions and they don't even realize it.
They don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
They will find out though. There is always that find out moment inadvertently where a whole bunch of people are moving in different directions, and then it's like it's a clash. It creates this kind of dramatic tension inside of a business.
I want to go back to Amplify.
Yeah.
When you started that business, you had intent, vision, what you were creating. What was one of those kind of lessons learned, 180 perspectives that changed once you actually were in the business and growing the business?
Yeah. Well, like the biggest one was our actual product because our first business, we were fortunate enough to sell and kind of a similar group of people. We were like, let's start an employee engagement company, a topic that we all were trying to lead by this best practice and be this culture that other people would want to emulate. And we're like, let's just
Right.
make a company around that. Right. So we're like, we set out to solve it with this at the time, like a mobile app that was like a communication tool before Slack existed. And we called it employee engagement, but it didn't it didn't help create cultures that were aligned to what our actual core philosophy was, right? It was a pretty hard
Okay.
moment to realize like our product doesn't actually deliver on the thing that we set out to accomplish. And so that was a big learning to go. So if we really wanted to tackle actually solving this challenge, like what's a fresh eye approach? And we made a full pivot. And we were at that point, like when we launched Amplify right away, we got to $1 million in recurring revenue in under 12 months, So like it seemed like we were onto something, but we knew we weren't. Like we knew it wasn't going to build out that long term. So we made a pretty significant pivot to kind of that measurement component.
Yeah.
But it ultimately allowed us to kind of follow the vision of what we were actually trying to do, like of the kind of way we wanted to serve people too.
Right. What's it like now serving at scale, going from serving at scale to kind of coming back into your own and doing one-on-one with people?
Well, one is I have a ton of empathy for how stressful it is for them.
Yeah.
And I don't try to pretend like it's the same. I think it's good to have people that are inside that environment and outside of that environment interacting with each other, because I've been there before, and I can sit and feel that pressure from the board and from the exec team and from the employees and from your customers, and that overwhelming kind of weight that you hold. And so I think that's one thing, is just like to be able to actually have genuine empathy and sit with people because you've been there before.
Do you feel like you're going to have more moving forward with these one-on-one relationships versus kind of solving problems with software? Will that be more fulfilling to you? Why take this direction?
For me, I think that I've always just I love being with people, and actually making, and I enjoyed the scale of software, and it's like macro, like the fact that like 1 million people have impacted with like engagement, like that's cool, like to know. But like I'm at a stage now where I'm like, but what is like fulfilling to me? Like where do I get what is like the best use of my skills and abilities? And like I think it is like just sitting with a person. And I also that's why I like working with executives, is that if you impact them at these critical moments on their trajectory where they might be getting in their own way, where they are genuinely, they feel lonely or overstressed, or they've got some skill gap that's blocking. It's like to be a resource that helps unlock that and helps that vision that you were talking about actually come true. It's super fulfilling to me to give that, like to be a part of that for other people. And I also, I'm sure everybody entrepreneur has this, but like I look back on a couple decisions, a couple small moments that had huge impacts for me. And it's a pretty neat thing to sit with a founder or a CEO and help them have some perspective in the moment and make a right decision that like unlocks the other direct, and you're just like, it's just, I just find that super rewarding.
Yeah. One reflection I have with you and your background and knowing your background, and one thing that I just recently found out about that I didn't know, but your whole life, I think you've been really centered around serving. And if I'm correct, or if LinkedIn's correct, it looks like you started out you went to school as a pastor. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's how I started my career. I was like 20. I started a church when I was like 22, and I became the head pastor, which was like, I had no business, honestly, at 24, 25, like of this church. I had the mayor and a state representative. And like, I learned a ton about leadership and about public speaking and how to hold kind of, but man, that was that's been a really long time ago, but I learned a ton about myself. And honestly, that was also the first time I was actually stretched, because it was like my first job out of school too. And I kind of floated through school, and I was in a band. Like I thought I was going to be a musician. And now all of a sudden, like the kind of this pretty stressful environment where you're also holding a lot. Like real people have real lives that are happening, and like just sitting with people during that too was,
Right.
in some ways, that's why it's like, in many ways, doing this work is like kind of coming home to, for me, in a totally different way, but it's a familiar place for me.
Yeah, it's definitely familiar space. You've been there, done it before. You can have the empathy for that. And that goes a long ways, I think. And I think that empathy really can open up people to talk about the things that they need to talk about.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think
the things maybe they've never even said to anybody else before too. Like that's it's a pretty, I mean, that's about as close to a sacred moment as you get to have with another human being, is when they say something out loud for the first time. And it creates something inside of them, like some awareness that was hidden from them before. It's like, I mean, what's cooler than that? It's a pretty cool moment to experience.
I want to go back to Amplify for a little bit and talk about kind of your experience with Peak. I think we said it was about 5 years ago. You got, was it COVID times or just prior, before COVID?
No, I think it was right around.
Okay. Because I think we actually did the sessions online. I don't even think we were in person.
I think it was at the very start of COVID.
Okay. And you guys were kind of in a position at the time. What was happening, and kind of reflect on how it came together for you guys?
Well, in our market, COVID was pretty brutal to the HR software market. And two, we were like the largest player in the market too, right? And so the market started to like consolidate really quickly. Our business went from like rapid growth to like a little bit flatter growth. And we were trying to come up with some way to kind of get our trajectory back on track quickly. And which is how we came to you. We've been doing OKR stuff forever, different versions of it, different philosophies, mostly debating about philosophies, honestly, and sometimes we'd all operate, half of us with one philosophy, half of us with another. And it was kind of in that environment, I think, when we first found you and like started partnering with you.
What was different for you guys? Was it stressful to go, hey, let's just go and try this new approach? We all have different approaches. Was it stressful for the team to like change gears once again and try another approach?
I feel like it should have been more than it ended up being. Like there was something about it was the right philosophy at the right time. We were all a little wounded, probably because of COVID, and like a little more vulnerable. Like we went from maybe like the bravado of like, we're taking over the world, to like a little more humble than we were earlier in our journey. And so it was partially that, and partially that, I mean, I really think, and this is part of what leadership is, but like when I went through your kind of your online stuff first myself, and it clarified, like I was a tacticianer for a decade of the same work. It's not like I was like unfamiliar, right? But it clarified and settled some things that didn't feel settled to me. And it just put some guardrails up to go, there's no perfect solution. What is best is just people agreeing and executing. And so we just like took it as a source of truth, like, and took it really seriously. And I really digested it and made it my own, like was like, I am going to become a true tacticianer of this like philosophy. And so, it just like worked, I think. And the people, I think, it clicked with everybody. Like I think part of it wasn't so different. It just solved a lot of wasted time that we had spent debating and or still being too ambitious. Like the part that really stands out to me that I loved and was like, we put these 10, what are all the things we should do? And we didn't say 3 things. We said like 10 things the very first time we did this. And it was just this whittling down and getting to 3 that was like, okay, this is where we're focused, and that level of clarity, and it created this like kind of conviction, like we all believed it too, and so we went after it.
Yeah, one of the things I do different, and our philosophies don't do it this way, is I like to make a list of everything that we think is most important. And if it's most important on the 1-year plan and their objectives, or the 90 days for the leadership team or any team when you're developing that, is to list those out, because the magic is actually in the whittling of the down of these, because the conversations that occur when you're balancing what you want to do and what you maybe shouldn't do. And I think a lot of people miss that. It's just that communication that happens when you are trying to bring it down to 3 or 5. And there's nuances how you actually have those conversations. That is kind of gets to be the tricky part for some teams. I think it's easier oftentimes when they have someone that can facilitate that process than the CEO trying to facilitate it and participate in it. It's
Right.
really hard to wear two hats at the same time when you're like having those conversations, or if you have the COO or maybe chief of staff trying to facilitate. But it's in that communication, that those conversations is where you start to say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do that, and start to build that conviction collectively.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the magic that I saw growing up doing businesses. I had someone else reflect on this in the past. They believe like most of the things that you end up teaching are the things that impacted you the most. 100%. I would say in my first couple businesses was I not collective in developing this stuff, where I had the vision that was like, okay, you go do this, you go do this, you go do this. That doesn't work at scale.
No.
And oftentimes doesn't work even at the early stage, right? So I think
it's funny. I like just did a LinkedIn post about that exact same concept, that like,
oh,
because
really?
I see this in coaching a lot. Like there is this one type of leader who often knows like they have an amazing business acumen and great business sense, but that does not mean you have followers. That does not mean you have people who are active participants. And
Right.
like technically knowing the right business thing to do and getting a team of people to actively make it come true are very different things.
Right.
And I think that's what's so frustrating about that leader. They get this so like internally so frustrated because they're like, oh, it's like, why will people not do? I know the right thing. I deeply know, but I don't have the ability to get people rowing in the same direction. Like,
Right.
how do I get them on board with this? And that is like a very common type of leader that I run into.
Yeah. I find it's not just giving those people inputs.
Right. It's not that.
It's providing space for them to give you inputs back and forth. It has to be a back and forth to get to it versus like, no, this is all the reasoning. Okay, let's go. It's what do you think of that? Or that's improv. Yes, and is a beautiful thing in an environment like that. Right. And we could do this. And this is why we should do that. If the communication isn't happening that way, it will definitely, going back to the beginning, start to put limits and blocks on what people are doing and starting to put ceilings on the capacity of the team, I think.
Right. I do have a question for you. What is the most different thing about your work today than when, like what's changed with companies today from when you and I worked together 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, I've worked with a lot more of them. I think the biggest thing isn't that it has changed, but I just have more clarity around why an operating system that we created is so important for teams doing things that have never been done before. I think I feel like I've pulled back the onion, the layers a little bit more, why that's so important. And I think it is that when teams are doing things that they have not done before, it's so important to have like the symbiosis of a team, this communication, alignment, learning, and empowerment package. Because if you don't have that, people just splinter off and they're not working together to like achieve what needs to be achieved. And it's not like a plumbing business, or if I was going to open up a bunch of dental offices, we could find the blueprints for those businesses. We could find them and replicate a lot of that stuff. But when you're building in an environment where you're creating a product that's never existed, or creating a product that's creating a new market, you have to have a system that aligns the team and brings the team together and allows them to execute. I think the other thing I would have probably said 5-6 years ago, Peak was a planning system. And the more I've, peeled the layers back, planning's part of execution. It's really, it's a system of execution for leadership teams. So I think that's what I've, maybe not a 180, but once I've gotten deeper into this and worked with more and more venture-backed teams, I really understand that the venture-backed teams are obviously ones doing something that's never been done before, because otherwise they wouldn't get funding. You're not going to fund something that's happened before unless, at least at a VC scale, right? And also, I've worked with some teams that are not VC backed, but they are doing things that have never been done before, and the operating system works in that capacity as well.
Right. That's cool. That's really cool. I mean, the reason the work you do works, what I do is also there is a level of, there's a pace that creates pressure. And that pressure needs great execution. It needs great internal work. It's like it's like different than the standard atmosphere of what takes place in venture. It doesn't just happen on its own. It takes a lot of intentionality to make things successful.
And in your work, I think it's so important too, because like the CEO is definitely standing in a space that's very different than any other type of business, especially in venture back. Because if I owned a technology company that was growing quickly, I could delegate and elevate myself into just a visionary role, and if I owned it. But when you have investors and you have a board, you are at the center of everything, and you can't just do that. And if you were to elevate yourself into this visionary position and just let everybody else do the work, the board would get rid of you quickly, right? That's not what you're getting paid to do. Like, that's part of your job, is to have the vision, but you also need to be like that hub and spoke of everything that's going on. And that puts a unique pressure on that CEO and each of those people in that leadership team that most people don't have. And the work that you're doing, understanding what that's like and having the empathy of what that is different. There's not a lot of people that can sit in your position and provide that. And I think it's so important. All right. Final question. Are you ready for this?
Most important question of my life.
All right, here's the scenario. You've washed ashore on a tropical desert island. Unfortunately, you're going to have to live there the rest of your life, but you have food and shelter. It's a beautiful island, but you'll never be able to leave. The one thing that you're missing is entertainment. There's no entertainment on the island.
Okay.
However, an old 80s boombox drifted ashore, and you have unlimited batteries for the rest of your life, but you can only choose one album to listen to the rest of your life of any genre or time frame that of your choice. What is it that you're going to listen to?
Wow. What a question. I was really, at first, I didn't know you were going to go with the 80s boombox. And I thought I got to like entertain. I was so excited. I was like, awesome. I'm bringing my guitar and we're going to have a great time. I'm going to write the best album that's ever existed. I'm going to get a lot better at guitar and then spend all my time writing, and it's going to be amazing. I was like, this sounds great. The boombox really put a snag on things. Like, I wish I was more of a, like, I love listening to classical music in the background. And I have to say, realistically, I'm not picking an album with words because I think I would, at this time frame, I would get totally burnt out of it. So I'd pick some Mozart. Like, I'd find the longest, best classical piece that really resonates with me, that has a lot of variation too, so I can kind of change my mood. But I'm going to do some research to figure out which one it is. But I think I'd have to go the classical route if it was just like every single day.
Well, that's interesting. I don't think anybody's said that before. And I think that's a smart idea with no lyrics.
I think the lyrics would, over time, if we're talking like I'm there for 30 years, like it's going to get a little tiring. I need something that has so much complexity and nuance that like I'm learning something new for years, and I think I could find that in classical music.
That's awesome. All right. Classical music for you. All right, Adam, thanks for joining me on Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Thanks, Jeff. It was great to be with you.